All right, day one, here we go. It's about 0 degrees in my garage right now, so I got my old man long underwear on and about 7 layers of clothes, and we're ready to go. So I'm gonna tear into this thing. My goal for today is to, at the very least, get it into front end service mode, and if I still have some time left, I'm gonna keep on chugging and start taking parts off the motor. But this video for sure is going to be getting the front end disassembled and everything out of the way so that we can get to all that stuff. And that's called front end service mode. So here we go. Step one is going to be to disconnect the negative terminal from the battery, just to make sure that I don't short anything out when I'm working with the ground straps and stuff down here. So we're going to disconnect the negative lead to the battery, and then I'm going to start working on taking the headlights out. All right, that locks it. Off to a great start. All right, step one is going to be to disconnect the negative terminal from the battery so that I don't accidentally short anything out. So we're just gonna pull that off real quick. It's 10 millimeter. Loosen out of the way. And then we're going to move on to removing the headlights. All right, so I'm about a minute into this and I already hit my first problem. The outside one that I was warned could be a problem was a problem. This bolt threads into a little brass fitting that's just like pressed into a plastic collar. The brass has fused itself to the bolt, so it just sits in there and spins and spins and spins. And the secret, apparently from what I've seen, is that you just put, like I put my gun on it and just kept backing it out and letting it spin until it's hot enough that it eventually just pulls out through the plastic. It is now broken, but it was broken before too, so I couldn't have adjusted the headlights or anything anyway. So I'll probably have to figure out something to do to replace that, but I do have all 4 bolts out of that headlight now. So we'll put this to the side and figure out what to do with it next. One headlight out. This side I got lucky. It was seized up too, but it eventually let itself loose, so that's good news. Right. Okay, that's both headlights out of the car. Good start. All right, and as per my plan, all that hardware went into a little cellophane bag. Number 1, headlights. That was the first set of bolts removed for the headlights. These get set to the side now. It's sealed up. Hopefully even I can't screw that up. Okay, next step is to remove the hood latches with a T30. There's 2 hood latches here. Those will go in a bag. All right, so the next step is going to be to pull these 4 plastic trim clips off the front. These make me nervous because I know they can break as well as the grill. So I got my little trim and molding tool set, which I had to go get a knife to get into because it's in itself a challenge to get into. I'm going to take this out of the packaging here and just kind of mess around and see which one seems to have the best grip. There are much better tools than this, but you know, this is what I could come up with. So let's see what we can do with these. Well, that was easy enough. So you just get this little notch under the center of these pins and they pop right out. It's like a drywall anchor kind of, so that wasn't so bad. Like a lot of stuff, it turns out to be not that bad. He says, without knowing what the hell he's doing. Oh, how hard could it be? Probably pretty hard. All right. I believe there's another clip involved in this, so I gotta figure that out. So hang on a minute. Okay, so if you're actually following along at home and you want to get the grill off, there's these 4 clips across the front top there that we just pulled off with the trim remover tool. But then underneath here, I've got it off now, but there's these, and they just kind of hook on to a pin down there. So I just got something long and pushed on it, and boom, pops right off. All right, next we're gonna disconnect cable for the hood latch. This little thing opens up here, and we can then push the cable through this opening, and then I think this whole crash member comes off. So let's see what happens here. I can see it's hinged right here. So I think it pops open from here. Okay, I got it. There's a little pin that fits into that hole right there. Push that out, boom, there you go. And then the next thing we want to do is there's a little ball on the end of the cable. We're going to go ahead and remove that cable completely so that this can now come out through there when we pull this off, which I think is what we're going to do next. Aha, there is 5 clips. The 5th one is for our windshield washer. Now we're free. It's funny, my note said 5 clips, but I can only find 4. It's a little plastic tab on the bottom of this thing that I'm sure to break if I force it. There we go. All right, there's our crash member cowl thing out of the way. All right, next on our little journey is we need to take the tension off of our serpentine belt, and we do that by putting our big serpentine belt tool on that big nut right there. And we're going to pull on it until this spring-loaded pin can pop into that little hole right there, and that will lock that tension off of the belt. So we're going to give that a try right now. All right, so we've got our tensioner tool on. We'll pull on that until this little pin engages. And now when I take this off, the tension stays off of that belt. Pretty cool. All right, in order to get the car into front end service mode, I've got to get this flare pulled off on both sides. And the easiest way to do it is going to be to take the tires off. I don't want to put the car completely on jack stands this whole project, so I'm just going to temporarily take this tire off, do what I need to do, and then pop it back on. The passenger side tire has to come off and stay off for a while because you use that as an access to get to a lot of the stuff at the bottom of the timing chain. So I'm just going to take this tire off temporarily so I can get up in here and not struggle. Not a lot of space to work. Alright, so now we've got the wheel off, we can get in here and see what's going on. Gotta take this cover off. It just screws off. And then there's 4 little plastic screws that hold this wheel well liner in place. I'll go ahead and run those out. I'm gonna get my trim tool and put some pressure behind those and see if that helps. It does. It does. Okay. And now this liner is just like fabric kind of stuff. Peel this back enough out of the way to get to what we need to do up here. So here we go. All right, so now, it's really hard to see, but just above the parking lamp and just below, there's a couple more of these plastic clips that we're going to try and pop loose. Oh, now I see why these guys. That's ridiculous. All right, no, isn't that something? yes. And that's all there is to it. Jeez. Okay. Supposedly now. All right. So I believe that was all now, just to get to this little Torx bit. I think I have to get this on both sides. All right. It took some doing, but I was able to get it. The first of the T25s that hold the front bumper on is up underneath here, which is why you have to take this loose. So it took a little working with a small T25 bit and a small 1/4 inch ratchet, but I was able to. I could take more pins out and take this flare all the way off. I just don't want to undo any clips that I don't have to. So I got it. I need to repeat this process on the other side. I'll spare you having to watch that. And then we take a bunch of these off across the front and the whole bumper is going to come off. So I'm going to go take care of the other side, put the tire back on this side, and we'll take the bumper off. Well, I just spent a half an hour on the other side getting those couple of plastic clips off. Well, I did a whole bunch of stuff. I took the other passenger side front tire off. I got the car on a jack stand now, and I'm going to leave that tire off because I need to keep that off for the rest of the job. While I was over there, I did the same thing that I did on the driver's side of getting those couple of plastic clips off so that I could access that little T25 headed bolt that holds the corner of the bumper on. And that took more time than anything I've done yet today. These plastic clips, now I get it. Now I understand why they're always zip tied and stuff like that. The one thing I didn't buy for myself was replacement plastic clips. So I think I'm just gonna pick up some of those. I just spent way too much time fighting with a couple of plastic clips. I actually broke my plastic clip removal tool because they're really in there. And what makes it even worse is that they're holding two pieces of plastic together. So if you just keep reefing on it, sooner or later, one of the three things is going to break. And chances are it's not going to be the cheap clip that you want to break, but the little tab attached to your bumper or whatever. So in the end, on the passenger side, I wound up just taking these, which were kind of splurged by, but man, what a great thing. I picked these up at AutoZone. They were like $8, these long reach bent needle nose. And I was able to just kind of bust off the head of the pins, the clips, and work them out, and I'll just either replace them with clips or zip ties. They do the same thing. That was way too much work for two plastic clips. So anyway, now I can get on with the rest of it, taking off the actual bolts that hold on the bumper. So that's what I'm going to do now. All right, more plastic clip goodness. A couple of them were scuffed off or like kind of ground off on the bottom from hitting curbs, so that made them impossible to get off. So a couple more broken plastic clips. I did get a couple off successfully, and now I think that this is loose to the point where I just have to unplug the fog lights and the temperature sensor, the external temperature sensor. So let's do that, and we'll take the bumper right off. Aha! And there it is. I found it was easier to just, rather than trying to unplug the line to the bulb socket to just pull the bulb right out. That was easier. So bumpers off. In case you're playing along at home, while I was under there taking off the stuff on that side, the skid plate was right there. It's actually on my list to do further on down, but I just took it off. 3 little screws holds this plastic skid plate on. It's a skid plate or more of a splash guard. But anyway, this is off and the hardware stays right with this. So I'm just gonna set this whole thing to the side. All right, we're making progress now. The next step is, kind of the whole point of this project is to release this sort of subframe structure that can be pulled forward just a couple inches. So there's a couple of things that we have to do to make that happen. There's 2 16mm bolts on each side of the bottom of this, and then there's 3 13mm on the front, and I think there's 2 little ones back here on the corner. And then we'll hit this with a hammer a little bit, and it should just kind of scooch forward. That's why we're doing all this, so that we have more than an inch of clearance between the exhaust manifold and the radiator to reach stuff. So I'm going to work on trying to get those bolts loose, and we'll see if we can make this thing move. All right, things are moving right along. We're to the point now where we're kind of getting to the reason why we're doing all this. This subframe assembly here is able to move forward a couple inches once we release the bolts that hold it in place. There's 2 16mm on each side underneath, 3 13s on either side on these horns, and there's like 2 10mm back here in the corners. Once those are loosened up, we should be able to hit this thing with a hammer and just scooch it forward, and that way we've got more than like an inch of clearance between the exhaust manifold and the radiator here, and we'll need that space. So I'm going to crawl underneath, loosen up all these bolts, and see if we can scooch this thing forward. Okay, I think that's it. Everything is loose. There's a 10mm right behind the flare, which is the other reason why you have to loosen the flare on each side. And I was able to get to it without really taking any more clips off. There's quite a bit of bend to this, and there's some room up behind here, so I was actually able to get the battery ratchet up in there and just pop those 2 10s out. 13s off the front, the 16s from the bottom. I think that's it. I'm gonna go underneath it with a BFH and hit on something nice and sturdy, and this is supposed to slide forward a couple of inches. So let's see how it goes. I think that's it. All that work to get 2 or 3 more inches of clearance. But man, what a difference those 2 or 3 inches make. That's fantastic. I'm gonna grab the camera and show you. All right, so here we are now looking down through the front between the radiator and the exhaust manifold. You can see my hammer laying down there on the floor. Before we went through this and pushed the subframe forward, you could barely get your fingers in between the radiator and this. So very, very difficult to work on this, and there's bolts in here that we need to get out. So that, I think, was well worth the effort because we really have a lot better access right now. I just hammered or pulled the subframe forward enough so that the back hole is lined up with the front hole, and I might just run 2 of the bolts back in just in the more advanced hole just to keep this thing from coming completely loose and falling on my feet. I don't think I want to push it much further than that. I think that's about the maximum you're going to get without this thing just falling off the frame. So there you go. That's what we did all that work for. So there it is. That's going to be the end of this part of the video. If you have other jobs that you're doing on a Gen 2 Mini, you can stop watching right now because that is the front end service mode done. I'd say with recording and everything, I've been at this for a little over 2 hours. It takes a lot longer just going back and forth with the camera. I took a bathroom break and a coffee break. So really, if I was just cracking down on this, I could have probably done this in about an hour. And it really wasn't that bad. Just to give you a point of reference, a couple weeks ago, I had to get the battery out of this car because I needed it to jumpstart another car during a snowstorm. It was the first time I've ever opened the hood on this car, and it took me 5 minutes to figure out how to do that. I was pretty proud of myself when I finally figured out how to open the hood. Now, I'm not a complete novice when it comes to tools. I have, handled some tools and stuff before, but I've never done anything like this. This is the furthest into a car I am already, and I did it in about an hour of real time with only a handful of tools. So there's hope for all of us. I'm going to end this video now, and we're going to pick back up when I start to actually get into the nuts and bolts of this, literally, where we're going to start getting access to taking the head off. So that'll be in the next part, but there you go. Car's in front end service mode. Thanks for watching. All right, just a reminder, if you're enjoying this process, you want to see how this goes for me, you want to see if it works when I put it back together, don't forget to subscribe and follow along, and we'll see you next time. Thanks.